Welcome. Ancient astronomers viewed the skies differently than we do. Cast your mind back to what it would be like in ancient times. You step outside at night, you can see over 1,000 stars. You'll know many of the stars personally because they illustrate stories that you've been hearing all your life. You use those stars to tell time, to determine directions, and to know when to plant and harvest. The perfect regularity of the cycles in the sky is the only guaranteed aspect of your life. Your worldview is partly defined by the skies, and many ancient astronomers are still telling us that we live in a small world where the heavens are ruled by gods and heroes. When you see transient or irregular events in the skies, like comets or meteors or even planets, it seems like these can only be messages from the gods. The point is that ancient astronomy had different tools and different goals than does modern astronomy. And yet, despite these differences, we also have a rich heritage coming to us from ancient astronomy. Ancient astronomers made many remarkable discoveries and achieved many remarkable feats. These were built on many thousands of years of sky watching. The most famous stars in the sky are what we call the Big Dipper. But these same stars form part of what is referred to as a Great Bear image in the sky. But did you know that people have been calling this a Great Bear for at least 14,000 years and perhaps more than 30,000 years? The same stars are depicted as a Great Bear by something like half of the cultures throughout both Eurasia and North America. The fact that a Eurasian constellation is widely duplicated in North America suggests that this idea was carried across the Bering Strait with the original settlers around 14,000 years ago. This makes the Great Bear one of the oldest intellectual properties of mankind. Did you know that the Great Pyramid in Egypt has its edges aligned north, south, and east, west to an astounding accuracy of 1/20th of a degree? That's an angle getting near the resolution of the human eye, and is only 10% of the size of the full moon. For the three big pyramids on the Giza plateau, the average accuracy is about the same, while the scatter of the three orientations is just about half the moon's size. This high accuracy is hard to do, even with care with modern technology. What is clear is that such alignment must have been done with the help of the skies by people we would call astronomers. Astronomers of many cultures have been working deeply on the observation and theory of the positions of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. It's remarkable that the Mayans, Chinese, Indians, Babylonians, and Greeks all had measured the orbital periods of the planets to parts per million accuracy, even 2 millennia ago. And did you know about the recent startling discovery in 2016 that the Babylonians, around 200 BC or so, were following the position of the planet Jupiter in the sky using a numerical method that is essentially integral calculus?
What's up, Ray? How you doing, buddy?
New discovery is surprising to modern
How you doing, man? Thanks for being here, dude.
because it's so long
Should I flex?
before the first step
I'll flex,
was
sure, why not?
calculus
Let's do it.
in the 1300s by mathematicians in Oxford.
What's up, buddy?
Did you know that the real historical origin of the Star
My
of
shake,
Bethlehem
man.
has now been identified
Protein
with
shake.
good confidence?
Not bad. What is
The
this?
stars are most famous.
Yo, thanks, buddy.
as
Thanks,
recorded
man.
in the
You're the
Bible
man, dude.
At the birth of Jesus.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate
Over
that,
the
man.
centuries, an incredibly wide range of ideas have been proposed.
This is the
to
astronomical
nature.
alignment of Stonehenge.
Startling
I'm gonna turn up
discoveries
the volume
establish conclusive
again.
evidence the historical date for the star mentioned in the Gospel
What's
of
up,
Matthew.
buddy? Thanks for being here, man.
This was published in 1999 by Michael Molnar, a historian of astronomy from Rutgers. It's not what anyone would have expected.
I haven't sat
Molnar's
down with your video
solution
yet. I'll
is
be
that
honest.
The Star of Bethlehem is a report
I have not
of a
watched
natal
the entirety
horoscope
of your video
that points ancient
yet.
astrologers to the birth of a very great king in Judea on 17
Have my head
April
down? No worries,
6
buddy.
BC. The validity of his solution has
I've
been
also been
sweeping
streaming
through
later.
the
I've been
scholarly
streaming starting at like
communities.
7, 8 o'clock here, which is like midnight there.
Did you know
So
about the
I'm glad you're getting sleep,
discovery
man.
of an awesome analog computer in a shipwreck off of the island of Antikythera near the Greek mainland, dating to around 100 BC? The complex gear mechanism was pulled up off of the floor of the Mediterranean in 1901. The workings of the Antikythera mechanism have only been revealed starting in 2005 when the corroded bronze gears have been given a thorough three-dimensional X-ray scan. The gears served to provide a full calendar, warning of eclipse times, telling of the dates of the Olympic Games and other festivals,
Try not to
giving
make
lunar
so many bad
phases
decisions
and
all
all the
night,
planet
yeah.
positions accurate to something like 1 degree.
Makes sense, but I was thinking about. I was going to comment on that.
Is
I was going to comment
arguably
that,
the greatest achievement in all astronomy before the year 1500.
but it was.
Our course
No, that's
will cover a
covered now.
very wide range in both.
Yeah, like I'll be
time and
playing
space.
Aztec
We'll be
tonight
talking about
after
events
7
and
p.m.
people
after like
from
midnight for
around
you, but-
4000 BC up to the Renaissance, and we'll cover all the inhabited continents.
What's up, man? Great to hear from you, buddy.
Perhaps the most famous example from all of ancient astronomy is Stonehenge. The astronomical key to this site is the fact that the main axis of the
Maybe
monument points
an
at
hour and a
midsummer
bit.
sunrise.
Maybe an hour.
So I'll spend the rest of this lecture and the next lecture telling you about the archaeoastronomy, archaeology, and latter-day history of Stonehenge.
1 whole hour, I think.
Stonehenge is a wonderful and awesome monument. It's on the Salisbury Plain in south-central England. It's just a 2-hour drive from London. The basic structure is a set of standing stones set in a circle that surrounds a horseshoe-shaped set of standing stones. The central set of stones consists of 5 pairs of very tall stones topped by a horizontal stone called a lintel. Each of these so-called trilithons have the lintel stone pegged to the vertical stones with a mortise and tenon joint. These joints have a knob sticking out of the top of the standing stone that fits into a hole in the lintel so the lintel can't easily fall off. The tallest reaches 24 feet from the ground. The biggest stones are 40 tons. The horseshoe of trilithons is surrounded by a circle of stones. The basic circle originally consisted of 30 standing stones, each topped by 2 lintels to form a continuous ring running around the top. The stones in the circle are made from a sandstone rock called sarsen. Each of the stones has been pounded into a roughly rectangular shape. This shaping of stones is rare amongst stones at other contemporaneous stone circles around the British Isles. This is the basic monument, although many of the original stones have fallen down or been taken away. The immediate vicinity of Stonehenge has a complex array of remains that go far past the basic monument. Centered on the monument is a circular ditch with a radius of 180 feet. The chalk dug out from the ditch was heaped into a bank running just inside the ditch. The ditch doesn't form a complete circle, as there are sections to the south and to the northeast that form openings into the central area. The opening towards the northeast forms part of a long linear feature called the avenue. The avenue is defined by 2 parallel ditches running out from the circular ditch around the monument. This avenue goes perfectly straight for 2,000 feet before veering to the right and ultimately running down to the river Avon. At the start of the avenue, just where it touches a circular ditch, is a now fallen, dressed rock given the colorful name of the Slaughter Stone. This name invokes an image of ritual sacrifices, and people imagined the victim laid out on this stone. Just a bit outside the ditch, just off-center in the avenue, is the upright heel stone. The heel stone is famous because it defines the astronomical alignment of Stonehenge. That is, on the morning of the June solstice, the longest day of the year, if you're at the center of Stonehenge, you'll see sunrise over the heel stone. There are many more stones and pits within the central ditch area. These form a circular array of 56 pits called the Aubrey holes. Each of these is about 3 foot in diameter and 3 foot deep. Nearly on top of these Aubrey holes are 4 undressed stones that define a rectangle. These are called station stones. 2 of the station stones are surrounded by small ditches. Close around the basic stone circle are 2 more rings of holes, irregularly spaced. And the center of the whole circle has one stone given the evocative name of the altar stone. This stone is now fallen and lying mostly buried under a lintel fallen from a trilithon. Stonehenge and all its surroundings were made by a culture of Neolithic farmers, given the name Beaker people. They flourished throughout the British Isles and the Western Europe from the late Stone Age to the early Bronze Age. Stonehenge was built in stages from roughly 3100 BC to 1600 BC. The first construction was the ditch and bank, plus the Aubrey holes, plus the station stones, and these were all built around 3100 BC. The basic circle and the inside trilithons were made from sarsen stones. They were put in place around 2500 BC. This is the basic monument. From then until 1600 BC, less impressive circles were made of the smaller bluestone rock with various rearrangements over the centuries. The larger area surrounding Stonehenge is filled up with contemporaneous monuments.
290,
These
no
are
way,
dominated by burial mounds of many types. Further, there are a variety of other circles or henges throughout the area. One of them, called Bluestone Henge, was recently discovered where the avenue arrives at the river Avon. This is apparently made out of the same bluestones that are now at Stonehenge itself. Stonehenge was built with only primitive tools. Archaeologists find many broken antler tips inside the pits and ditches. These were the tools used to dig in the ground. Many modern reenactments have been made where small crews of people have moved stones long distances, dressed the stones, and set them upright. All this with just ropes, logs, and a lot of effort. This is impressive, as the largest stone weighs 40 tons. To me, the most impressive point about the construction is that the stones used were transported tremendous distances to be brought to Stonehenge. The big sarsen sandstones were dragged 18 miles from Marlborough Downs to the north. The smaller bluestones were dragged and perhaps floated by raft from quarries in Wales, about 150 miles away. That's an incredible amount of effort to get particular stones from afar, while local stones were apparently not good enough. Perhaps the bluestones were holy for some reason, although we'll never know. In any case, the Stonehenge builders must have had some incredibly strong motivation to drag in stones from so far away. The basic astronomy of Stonehenge is an alignment towards the sunrise at midsummer. That is, if you stand in the center of the Stonehenge circle, look out down the avenue, over the top of the heelstone, then you'll see sunrise at exactly that position on June 21. So let's see how this works. This is the premier exemplar of archaeoastronomy.
I want to finish this. I just want to do a set first.
The word archaeoastronomy can generically refer to the study of astronomy as it was practiced in ancient times. But there's also a much more specific meaning having to do with how ancient peoples built monuments aligned to the stars. The basic paradigm of archaeoastronomy is that ancient peoples incorporated astronomy into their old temples and other structures by pointing to a particular direction around the horizon where something significant happened. Such directional symbolism is universal in all cultures, including our own. The reasons are widely varied, but they're always there. They always go back to the astronomy, and they're often charged with strong cultural traditions. For most ancient peoples, these alignments are a common way to interact with the sky. But the astronomical origins might have been partly lost on the common folk. The basic setup of archaeoastronomy is that some now ancient building is pointing at some direction on the horizon. The pointing might use some obvious main axis of building plan, or the architecture can somehow indicate a position for an observer to stand, plus some stone marking a direction to look. This is like the stones marking a foresight and a back sight for aiming a gun. The position of the observer to stand could be given by the center of a circle, a throne, a statue, or the top of a grand staircase. The direction to look might be marked as down some central axis, along a wall, perpendicular to a wall, or by some distant stone. The astronomically significant direction on the horizon is usually one of the 4 cardinal directions or one of the 4 solstitial directions.
Oh, what's up, Wade? What's
The
up,
4
Wade? How you doing, man?
cardinal directions are usually north,
What's up, Ray and
east,
Wade? Thanks for being here, dude.
south, and west. The 4 solstitial directions are towards either sunrise or sunset on the dates of either the summer solstice or the winter solstice. These solstitial directions are the sun's extreme north during summer and the sun's extreme south during winter. The days of the solstices are close to June 21 and December 21 every year. For people in the southern hemisphere, summer and winter have to be reversed. In addition, there's a lot of talk about the moon's equivalent extreme rise and set directions. Also, in rare cases, the significant direction can be towards the rise of some bright star. We all know what the cardinal directions are, but the solstitial directions aren't so commonly known. So let me tell you more about them. Well, the prime cause is that the Earth's rotation is tilted by close to 23 degrees when compared to the plane of its orbit around the sun. We've all seen this represented by the tilt of the North Pole and the standard desk globe. The globe has the equator and the pole tilted by 23 degrees with respect to the horizontal. Even over many years, our Earth's polar axis will not move. So it's always pointing in the same direction, called the North Pole. So as our Earth moves around the sun in its orbit, the northern hemisphere is tilted alternatively towards the sun for half the year and pointed away from the sun for the other half of the year. When the northern hemisphere is pointed towards the sunlight hits more directly and the days are longer. This makes for summer. In the other half of the year, the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, getting only slanted light for short days. And this makes for winter. The tilt is oriented such that the northern hemisphere is pointing most towards the sun every June 21, the summer solstice. The northern hemisphere is pointed the most away from the sun every December 21, the winter solstice. Halfway between these dates, the sun will equally illuminate both hemispheres, north and south, and these dates are called the equinoxes. So the equinoxes are close to every March 21 and September 21. The solstice dates are connected with the tilt
sounding great
of the
too,
Earth's
buddy.
orbit.
You're sounding
They're
great.
also connected with the
Sounds like
never-ending
you're feeling
seasonal
good.
cycles of
Important
hot and
to
cold.
take care of stuff.
The seasonal cycles
your life
connected with
first,
changes in the
family,
length of the
whatever.
day, and also how
doing that
high
too.
the sun gets in the sky
Usually
during
I
the
have
day. These
usually I
universal
have the
connections
volume-
are easy and obvious.
Usually I have the volume corrected it like this, but I really want to. I don't want to talk today very much. I mean, I love talking with you, man. But I mean, that's why I turned it up a little bit. Thanks, man. You're the best, man. Thanks for being here.
Hunter-gatherers and all farmers depends critically on these seasonal cycles. And this is the reason for the universal attention of all cultures to the yearly sun cycle. Another obvious aspect of this yearly sun cycle is the periodic variations in the direction along the horizon for the rising sun. On the March equinox, the sun rises exactly towards the east. On the next day, as the sun moves a little bit to the north in the sky, the sunrise position is just a little bit north of east along the horizon. As the days progress, the sunrise keeps moving more and more to the north. For typical northern latitudes, by April 21, the sun is rising 16 degrees north of east. And by May 21, the sun is rising 27 degrees north of east. This stepping to the north slows down as midsummer is approached. The northernmost sunrise happens on the solstice, June 21, with a sunrise position of 32 degrees north of east, again for typical northern latitudes. After the solstice, the sunrise direction starts to move south, picking up speed until it again rises exactly to the east on the equinox, September 21. For the next half year, the position of the sunrise closely mirrors the first half of the year. from September to December, the sunrise position is moving south, reaching its southernmost sunrise point almost 32 degrees south of east on December 21, the winter solstice. From the winter solstice to the March equinox, the sunrise position is moving north. Then on March 21, the whole cycle starts over again. And this repeats endlessly, year after year. The situation for sunset direction is just a mirror of the sunrise directions. On March 21 and September 21, the sun sets exactly to the west. The sun has its northernmost sunset on the summer solstice and its southernmost sunset on the winter solstice. The sunrise and sunset positions are the most reliable and easiest to measure aspect of the seasonal cycle. There's nothing special about what happens on the days of the equinox, but the solstices are when things turn around, both the sunrise changes and the seasonal changes. With the seasonal cycle being so critical for all ancient peoples, it's plausible that these would be commemorated in stone and architecture. With this, the primary directions for archaeoastronomy are the 8 cardinal and solstitial directions. In all, archaeoastronomy is looking for the nearly universal commemoration of the cardinal and solstitial directions, rarely including star-rise directions, in the monuments and myths of the ancient cultures. Stonehenge is famous for the alignment of its main axis towards the midsummer sunrise.
What's that?
The indicated direction is simply the main axis of the monument from the center, over the slaughter stone, over the heel stone, and straight down the avenue. This indicated direction points towards the place on the horizon where the sun rises on Midsummer Day, June 21. If you stand at the center of Stonehenge on this day, you can see through a gap between the 2 upright stones under their lintel and with the heel stone viewed in the middle, just poking up above the distant horizon. And that is where the solstice sun rises. This basic astronomical alignment has been recognized from antiquity. But it was only in 1965 that this alignment started a worldwide obsession with Stonehenge. This began with the publication of the best-selling book titled Stonehenge Decoded by Gerald Hawkins. Hawkins was an astronomer, then chair of the astronomy department at Boston University. On the back of the book, the blurb pushed one of the strong selling points as being that all of the many astronomical calculations were made with a computer. The public was intrigued by this recovery of long-lost ancient wisdom. I remember my mom reading the book to me back when I was a kid. I think I was 13 years old at the time. This book launched storms of protests from archaeologists, and the book launched the whole field of archaeoastronomy. Hawkins' computer work confirmed the alignment on the solstice sunrise, but he also proposed a series of other alignments. The main ones are 4 station stones pointing towards the extreme positions of moonrise. That is, the station stones form a rectangle, and one pair of the sides points towards a direction to the southeast where the southernmost possible moonrise occurs. Hawkins goes from the mere existence of this sightline to claim that the Beaker people intentionally constructed this alignment. Further, Hawkins proposed an imaginative way to use the 56 Aubrey holes to form a computer to calculate the dates of upcoming eclipses. The idea was that the Beaker people had a variety of stone markers they placed in various Aubrey holes and then moved them around on a set schedule and kept this up for centuries. When some particular stones aligned, then there would be the possibility of an eclipse occurring. So Hawkins is claiming that Stonehenge is not only an astronomical observatory, but also an analog computer to predict eclipses. The end result of all this astronomical research was the view that Stonehenge was a marvelous astronomical observatory, millennia in advance of the rest of the world in science. Okay, so Stonehenge is this wonderful ancient monument with astronomical alignments. But what does it all mean? Well, British antiquarians were the first to pay attention and study Stonehenge, and they attributed the monument to Merlin or the Druids. The Druids were the intelligentsia of the Celtic peoples through the British Isles. They're perhaps best known as being religious leaders with a passion for
2 days ago.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. Göbekli Tepe is an enigma of the ancient world, a huge site containing circular enclosures made up of huge T-shaped pillars that date back to at least the 10th millennium BC. So far, only a handful of the enclosures have been excavated, and many more remain below ground. These pillars contain incredible imagery in relief, including a variety of animals such as birds, snakes, foxes, bulls, scorpions, and more. There are arms and hands, suns and moons, and other mysterious symbols. We don't have a definitive guidebook to interpret what we see, but the layout of the animals on the stones does seem to be deliberate, in that we are not looking at random assemblages, but that the animals seem to be carved in specific layouts and orientations, much like they are telling a story. It appears that the ancient people of Göbekli Tepe carefully positioned the animals on the pillars, so that each of them had a specific relationship to one another, but why this was done has led to a number of researchers to speculate. We first understood ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, a piece of rock with 3 languages carved onto it, that turned out to be the key to unlocking the history of dynastic Egypt. As discussed in a recent video, Martin Sweatman believes that Pillar 43, also known as the Vulture Stone, is the Rosetta Stone of Göbekli Tepe, a stone that if deciphered correctly will help us understand the meaning of the motifs on the famous T-shaped pillars. You can read Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods and Martin Sweatman's Prehistory Decoded to learn more. But, as stated in my video on Pillar 43, the eagle or vulture has been interpreted as the constellation of Sagittarius. The scorpion is Scorpius, and the bending bird with the fish wriggling down it is Ophiuchus. The circular feature on the wing of the vulture is interpreted as the sun. Lower down, and the duck or goose is Libra, and the dog or wolf is Lupus. Hancock, Sweatman, and many others believe that Pillar 43 is a star map. And, using computer software, Sweatman worked out it's a map of the sky showing the summer solstice around 10,950 BC, a date that coincides with the Younger Dryas event. This event, as I've discussed in a previous video, saw a dramatic change in global temperature that many scientists and independent researchers believe was caused by a series of asteroid or meteor strikes in the northern hemisphere. This event would have been a truly devastating time for humanity, with temperatures plummeting back to the lows of the last glacial maximum. It led to a megafaunal extinction and would have certainly led to a sudden decrease in human population. Can you imagine witnessing an event such as this? If it happened today, the world as we know it would change forever, just as it did for our ancient ancestors. And if Martin Sweatman's interpretation of Pillar 43 is correct, it may mean that Göbekli Tepe is remembering this earth-changing time. He believes it is an ancient record set in stone, and could therefore be a possible warning for the future, being purposefully buried so it could survive the test of time. I must say I do love this idea, and after reviewing Sweatman's work and the original idea in Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods, I do think their interpretation of Pillar 43 is the best I've seen to date. But if you saw my previous video on the Vulture Stone, you know all of this already. So how does Pillar 43 become a type of Rosetta Stone? How does it help us interpret the other stones of Göbekli Tepe? Well, Martin Sweatman used Pillar 43, including the so-called handbags or sunset symbols and associated animals at the top, to begin reconstructing the zodiac of ancient times. He used the reliefs of Göbekli Tepe, ancient cave art from France and Spain, as well as the imagery displayed on the altars of the ancient site of Çatalhöyük to recreate the signs of the zodiac of this long-forgotten time. It's a huge job, so how did he do it? Well, as Sweatman himself admits, his work is of course subjective and open to debate. But, like I always say, we have to start somewhere. And even if he is proved wrong in the future, it may be a stepping stone closer to unravelling the mystery. Maybe over time he'll be proved correct, or maybe his work will need some revision, or maybe it will be proved wrong. But I do like the methodical way he has gone about it. In the series of videos on his YouTube channel, which I have linked below in the description and would urge you to watch, he builds on his work on Pillar 43 and continues to reconstruct the ancient zodiac. Before we go further, as stated, Sweatman showed how he believes Pillar 43, and hence Göbekli Tepe, may be commemorating the Younger Dryas event. As many scientists and researchers such as Graham Hancock believe, the Younger Dryas event may have come about after a fragmented comet or asteroid impact that is believed to have come from the Taurid meteor stream. A stream of meteors that are today seen emanating from Pisces to Aries and then into Taurus, hence the name the Taurids. But Sweatman has shown that at the time of the Younger Dryas, the Taurids would have been seen coming from the constellations of Capricornus, the northern part of Aquarius and Pisces. As shown on Pillar 43, Sweatman identifies Pisces as the bending bird, and if other pillars at Göbekli Tepe encode the earth-changing Taurid event of the Younger Dryas, we would expect to see reliefs of the bending bird together with animals that look like the constellations of northern Aquarius and Capricornus. In Sweatman's opinion, this is that pillar. As you can see, the fox does look a bit like northern Aquarius, and the bull does have similarities to Capricornus. Therefore this pillar may be commemorating the location in the night sky where the Younger Dryas impact events originated. The fox, aka northern Aquarius, is the central constellation which the Taurids would have been strongly associated with. Therefore it is no surprise that we see this pillar with the fox in the centre of a chevron-like relief. I believe this is the tallest known pillar at Göbekli Tepe, and therefore it may have been the most important. And Sweatman believes it is telling us there was a comet or asteroid-like strike originating from northern Aquarius, which, as stated, is the centre of the Taurid stream in ancient times. Interestingly, Pillar 33 at Göbekli Tepe shows bending birds on one side, aka Pisces, and on the other side is a fox, which is Aquarius. From both the fox and the bending birds, there are snakes coming out of them. The snake heads converge on the edge or inner face of the pillar. Sweatman therefore believes that the snakes represent the meteors of the Taurid stream, which are seen emanating from the constellations. If nothing else, these depictions show the animals of Göbekli Tepe cannot represent real animals in nature because snakes don't emanate from foxes and birds. These animals have no natural association and therefore must have been used on this pillar to tell a story. As some of you will notice, the animals that are said to associate with the constellation can be seen across the site facing different ways. So clearly the artists of Göbekli Tepe did use some artistic license when creating the pillars, but with regards to Martin Sweatman's interpretation, for example, wherever we see a fox, whether it is facing left or right, it still represents the northern part of Aquarius. The same can be said for the other animal constellations. On this pillar, you could argue that the fox should be facing the opposite way, so it better matches the constellations in the night sky. But artistically, this would look somewhat odd as the bull and the bird are facing towards the right. Therefore the stonemasons must have had some artistic license. There is more supporting evidence for Sweatman's Göbekli Tepe interpretation. This pillar shows a belt buckle of nested U-shapes connected to a fox pelt loincloth. Sweatman believes that this belt buckle could be a depiction of a comet, an idea that Andrew Collins first mentioned due to the similarities between the drawings of comets by Chinese astronomers from the 1st millennium BC, which seem to depict them as U-shapes. So, from what we have learned so far, this image could be telling us that a comet originated from the fox, aka Northern Aquarius. So, Sweatman was using his interpretation of Göbekli Tepe to reconstruct the zodiac of the ancients, but in order to complete it, he had to look at other ancient sites. Çatalhöyük is an ancient settlement that somewhat bridges the gap between Göbekli Tepe and the more recent ancient civilizations we know a lot more about, because it dates between 7200 and 6500 BC. At Çatalhöyük there are 4 types of shrines, each depicting a different type of animal. One shrine is made of bull heads and horns, one is made of ram heads and horns, one shows leopards, and there is also this interesting splayed creature. It has been identified as a bear by archaeologists, and interestingly, it also features at the top right of Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe. This model was also found in the Göbekli Tepe fill. Therefore we see a link between the earlier site of Göbekli Tepe and the later site of Çatalhöyük. And if the Göbekli Tepe animals are depicting star constellations, then maybe the shrines of Çatalhöyük are also displaying the same. As stated in my video on the Vulture Stone, Sweatman believes the imagery portrays the summer solstice, winter solstice, spring and vernal equinoxes. So if there are 4 altars displaying 4 types of animal at the later site of Çatalhöyük, maybe these 2 depict the 4 important times in the calendar. The 4 constellations that are associated with the solstices and equinoxes between 7200 and 6500 BC were Taurus, Capricornus, Virgo and Aries. The animals on display on the 4 shrines of Çatalhöyük are a bull, ram, bear and leopards.
Wow.
From Göbekli Tepe, Sweatman has already showed that the bull represents not Taurus but Capricornus, and that this bear is Virgo. That therefore leaves the ram and the leopard. He believes the ram is Aries, something that has lasted to the present day, and therefore the leopard must represent Cancer. Yes, these are assumptions. There has to be with this kind of work. But Sweatman believes that these animals do fit the constellations, and as there is continuity between the type of imagery of Göbekli Tepe and Çatalhöyük, for example the form of the bear, he believes he is accurately reconstructing the zodiac of the ancients. So, based on everything mentioned, this is the ancient zodiac so far. In fact, all we are missing are the animals for Leo and Taurus. To continue the process and to fill in the gaps, based on the assumption that the ancient people depicted the solstices and equinoxes.
Yo, thank you, Yulan. I appreciate that. It's very nice of you. That I was lifting a bit. I could do a little flex, a little flex. I'm not flexing 100% because they're a bit sore.
And interestingly, there are just 4 types of animal painted in this section: the bull, the rhino, the horse and a duck-like bird. Based on Sweatman's work at Göbekli Tepe and Çatalhöyük, he has already identified
Thank you, appreciate it, that's nice of you.
And this duck-like bird is Libra. Therefore, knowing the constellations the sun is in on the solstices and equinoxes around 15,000 BC, the rhino must be Taurus and the horse must be Leo. The way in which the animals are drawn are the best fit for these 2 remaining constellations. As Sweatman himself admits, this is subjective, but here is the reconstructed ancient zodiac based on the work from the Lascaux Caves, Göbekli Tepe and Çatalhöyük. Sweatman goes even further and analyses imagery from more ancient caves, and notes that by using his ancient zodiac, the animal paintings in these caves that have been dated using scientific methods all correspond with the correct solstice and equinox constellations at the time they were painted. I know some of you will poke holes in Sweatman's hypothesis, but I have to say that I haven't given his work the justice it deserves. If you want to learn more, I would recommend his new book, Prehistory Decoded, where he does go into a lot more detail, including scientific data plotting from various ancient sites to prove his hypothesis. You should also check out the series of videos on his YouTube channel. Links to his YouTube channel and his book are detailed in the description below. This video is a very convoluted look at Sweatman's work, as I really just wanted to use my platform to introduce you to what could be very important work in our understanding of prehistoric humanity. For me personally, I am yet to come across a better interpretation for what we see at Göbekli Tepe, but as always I'll keep an open mind. Other researchers including John Murray and Andrew Collins offer alternative explanations for Pillar 43 which should also be looked at and critiqued. I should also add that the archaeologists working at Göbekli Tepe have released a paper in response to Martin Sweatman, and it is titled More Than a Vulture. And in the abstract, the archaeologists say that they would like to comment on a few points that they feel requires consideration in the discussion. I'll be looking into the points raised, and I can detail this in a future video. How I see it, the more minds that are focused on Göbekli Tepe, the better, because finding the key to unlocking the mysteries of this site may well be the key to understanding our own ancient origins. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.
The human race has been building huge stone structures for ages. What are the origins of these structures? What were these circular constructions used for? Many of these structures were sealed up thousands of years ago by the people who built them. But in some cases, wind and waves wore away that protective covering over time. These structures are called megaliths. You could call them gigantic works of art.
Megalithen sind monumentale Steinanlagen.
They were built long before the pyramids.
Pyramiden errichtet haben.
Technical and logistical masterpieces.
Thank you for the follow, ULN. I appreciate that. It's very cool of you. Thank you.
Göbekli Tepe is one of the oldest discovered man-made structures on Earth. At 12,000 years old, Göbekli Tepe predates humanity's oldest known civilizations. Its megalithic structures were cut from rock millennia before the 4,500-year-old pyramids in Egypt, the 5,000-year-old Stonehenge in England, or the 7,000-year-old Nabta Playa, which is the oldest known astronomical site. However, because the ancient structure is so vast and complex, archaeologists are still excavating it since its discovery in 1994. Despite all those years of research, they are still working to unravel the site's biggest mysteries: who built it and why. Of course, the default position by most academics is that Göbekli Tepe is some sort of temple. This seems to be the fallback position any time a structure cannot be explained in academia's current historical paradigm. Ironically enough, in the case of Göbekli Tepe, supposing that it is a temple causes the academic paradigm to completely break down as a result. It is important to note that up until now, archaeologists suspected that humans only began building complex societies after the invention of agriculture. They also thought that complex religions only emerged after those events. But Göbekli Tepe overthrows those theories. The site sits in the core of the Fertile Crescent, a region of the Middle East historically considered the birthplace of farming, writing, and more. Yet, Göbekli Tepe was a pre-agricultural society. It was built before people in the region started farming. In contrast to the idea that it was a temple, some researchers and scientists have speculated that Göbekli Tepe was actually an astronomical observatory. There are two notable theories inside this camp. One suggests that the site was aligned with constellations in the night sky. Another claims that carvings at Göbekli Tepe record a comet impact that hit Earth at the end of the last ice age. The site was first noted in a survey conducted by Istanbul University and the University of Chicago in 1963. American archaeologist Peter Benedict identified lithics collected from the surface of the site as belonging to the aceramic Neolithic, but mistook the upper parts of the T-shaped pillars for grave markers, postulating that the prehistoric phase was overlain by a Byzantine cemetery. But in 1994, when Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute was finishing some excavation work at a nearby Stone Age settlement, he decided to re-examine the Göbekli Tepe hilltop. To his surprise, he recognized the few remnants he found on the surface had similar elements, suggesting there might be more buried below. All that dirt hides dozens of structures spread across an area some 1,000 feet wide and 50 feet tall. The people who built the site constructed large, intricately decorated stone circles, later burying them in sand. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community because Göbekli Tepe could not have been built by farmers. Farming did not really exist at that point. But with no domesticated pack animals or metal tools to lighten the load, Göbekli Tepe would have had to have been built using rudimentary instruments and human hands. Still, there is not any evidence suggesting people actually lived at Göbekli Tepe. There were no burials and no apparent homes. So, to better understand who the site's visitors were, scientists were forced to look to the nearby countryside. When they did, they found signs that for centuries before Göbekli Tepe appeared, Stone Age hunter-gatherers in the region seemed to be building small permanent settlements where they lived communally, sharing their foraged resources. If that is confirmed, then such sharing might have helped spawn the creation of society. But even then, why did hunter-gatherers from these surrounding communities seemingly work together in large numbers to build Göbekli Tepe? The answer to that question remains one of the biggest remaining mysteries. In 2013, Giulio Maggi, an archaeoastronomer at the Polytechnic University of Milan in Italy, simulated what the sky would have looked like from Turkey when Göbekli Tepe was built. Over millennia, the positions of the stars change due to the Earth wobbling as it spins on its axis. Stars that are near the horizon will rise and set at different points, and they can even disappear completely, only to reappear thousands of years later. Today, Sirius can be seen almost worldwide as the brightest star in the sky, excluding the Sun, and the fourth brightest night sky object after the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. Sirius is so noticeable that its rising and setting was used as the basis for the ancient Egyptian calendar. At the latitude of Göbekli Tepe, Sirius would have been below the horizon until around 9300 BCE, when it would have suddenly popped into view. Maggi argued that the temple was built to follow the birth of this star and that the appearance of a new object in the sky could have triggered a new religion. 3 of the excavated rings seem to be aligned with the points on the horizon where Sirius would have risen in 9100 BCE, 8750 BCE, and 8300 BCE, respectively. In addition to the Sirius constellation, researchers have proposed that Göbekli Tepe is aligned with the constellations of Orion, Taurus, and the clusters of the Pleiades. In 2014, researcher Andrew Collins, in his book Genesis of the Gods, proposed that the site of Göbekli Tepe was tracking Deneb, a first magnitude star in the Cygnus constellation. This theory gained credence in 2015 when two researchers, Alessandro De Laurentiis and Vincenzo Orofino from the Department of Mathematics and Physics at the University of Salento in Italy, verified Collins' findings. It can be said with certainty that the main candidate presenting orientations towards celestial bodies is the pair of central pillars present in each of these structures. These pillars might be some sort of astronomical marker, since at the time of their construction it was possible to enjoy from every enclosure a view of the horizon without any artificial obstacles. The careful evaluation of the effects caused by atmospheric extinction has enabled us to verify that the central pillars of the studied enclosures are in fact turned to face the setting point of Deneb. In conclusion, it is reasonable to think that the builders of Göbekli Tepe, by creating the site, wanted to transmit some of their cosmological beliefs to future generations, and that they intentionally oriented the central pillars of the enclosures towards some astronomical object. In Table 3, we report a summary of the results obtained in the present work which suggests this conclusion. The researchers caution that it must be noted, however, that the data reported in Table 3 cannot be considered definitive and only constitute good approximations, since the embryonic state in which the dig lies does not allow us to draw definitive conclusions about them. Most of the pillars inside the enclosures feature ornate carvings of animals like snakes, foxes, wild boars, birds, and other animals. Although many of the pillars focus on just a single animal, other carvings combine their art into a more complex motif. Göbekli Tepe's Pillar 43 is the most prominent of these. This pillar appears to feature a large vulture, other birds, a scorpion, and additional abstract symbols. The carvings are masterful reliefs repeated many times over, implying the work of trained craftsmen who not only knew what the animals were supposed to look like, but also had the technical ability to recreate them. In 2017, a pair of chemical engineers made global headlines when they claimed that they were able to connect animal carvings on Göbekli Tepe's pillars to the positions of various groups of stars in Earth's sky many millennia ago. In a paper published in the Journal of Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, they argue that the so-called vulture stone carved on Pillar 43 is a date stamp for a catastrophic comet strike 13,000 years ago. This idea gained a lot of attention because scientists already suspected a comet struck Greenland around this time, potentially triggering the Younger Dryas period. It appears Göbekli Tepe was, among other things, an observatory for monitoring the night sky. Martin Sweatman, a chemical engineer at the University of Edinburgh, said in a media release. One of its pillars seems to have served as a memorial to this devastating event, probably the worst day in history since the end of the Ice Age. Mainstream archaeologists, including the team working directly on the site, reject the observatory and comet hypotheses. According to them, while the archaeological site is remarkably well preserved, the forces of time have changed the location of certain features. For example, studies suggest some of the pillars were removed and recycled elsewhere. Furthermore, later civilizations in the area, and more recently farmers, have rearranged portions of the certain pillars, even breaking pieces off. The researchers have since tried their best to restore Göbekli Tepe's pillars to their original locations, but the initial layout at the site's stunning round buildings remains up for debate. That makes it impossible at the moment for archaeologists to know whether Göbekli Tepe had any astronomical significance at all. Nevertheless, they seem to categorically reject the observatory hypotheses in favor of the temple hypothesis, which also destroys their heretofore historical paradigm. Go figure. For those researchers not bound by the arbitrary academic historical paradigm, a myriad of connections is readily available for analysis. Ironically, It was Klaus Schmidt himself that engaged in speculation regarding the belief systems of the groups that created Göbekli Tepe based on comparisons with other shrines and settlements. He presumed shamanic practices and suggested that the T-shaped pillars represent human forms, perhaps our own ancestors. This corresponds well with an ancient Sumerian belief that agriculture, animal husbandry, and weaving were brought to humans from the sacred mountain Eker, which was inhabited by Anuna deities. Schmidt identified this story as a primeval Oriental myth that preserves a partial memory of the emerging Neolithic. Indeed, science has provided evidence that bolsters this ancient Sumerian belief. Göbekli Tepe is in an area that geneticists suspect may have been the original source of at least some of our cultivated grains. Recent DNA analysis of modern domesticated wheat compared with wild wheat has shown that its DNA is closest in sequence to wild wheat found in this area, suggesting that this is where modern wheat was first domesticated. It has been postulated that Göbekli Tepe is actually connected to the Great Flood and Noah's Ark. The pillars thus far excavated are covered in animal carvings of all sorts. Some of the animals are indigenous to the area, but many are not. And some of the animal depictions are not of any known extant species. Andrew Collins suggests this monument could have been a literal recording of the flood. Göbekli Tepe lies only about 350 miles from Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark is said to rest. The careful depiction of animals could be a catalog of the animals included on the Ark. The archive recommends that you view our recent presentation on the Great Flood and its connection to the Anunnaki. A link has been provided in the description. In addition to animal depictions, the two tallest pillars in the middle of each circular enclosure may serve as some sort of record as well. In contrast, these pillars are anthropomorphic. They have low relief arms that come around to the front and end in long skinny fingers cradling the navel area. The figures also seem to be wearing belts with various strange symbols. These depictions are strikingly similar to other cultures across the globe. The aspect of the arms terminating in front and around the navel is a motif common around the world. It has been argued that these depictions are representations of the giant creator deities in these various cultures. Many researchers have linked these depictions with the Book of Enoch specifically. There we find the story of the Watchers, a race of angels who guarded the Garden of Eden. These quote-unquote angels came from the heavens and laid with the wives of man to create the Nephilim. Many scholars have posited that these watchers were known as the Anunnaki to the Babylonians and that the terms may be interchangeable, documenting the simultaneous arrival of extraterrestrial giants on the planet. These advanced races came to assist humanity with arts and knowledge. Göbekli Tepe appears in the same moment and marks a huge leap in knowledge and skill that did not exist on the planet before. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has thrown mainstream academia's historical timeline into disarray. After 20-plus years of excavation, they have gained certainty only on one singular fact. The site was constructed long before they had believed humans were capable of such architecture. Beyond that, their only consensus is that the site must be some sort of temple. On many occasions, the archive has pointed out how mainstream scholars are limited by their own arbitrary restrictive paradigms. Göbekli Tepe is a perfect example of this phenomena. If mainstream cannot even acknowledge the possibility of the site being an ancient observatory, what do you think the chances are of them linking Göbekli Tepe to paleo contact? Fortunately, the archive is not bound by such restrictions, and that allows for a more comprehensive point of view of Göbekli Tepe. In our opinion, the site could be the location marker of either the embarkation or disembarkation of the biblical Noah's Ark. Of course, as we have previously outlined, the biblical Ark story is in fact a retelling of a much older Sumerian account that details the role of the Anunnaki in ancient Earth history. We also believe that Göbekli Tepe could have served more than one purpose. In addition to it being a monument commemorating the Great Flood, it could have served as an observatory tracking the precession of various star clusters and constellations possibly associated with the Anunnaki. What the archive does not believe is that Göbekli Tepe was an ordinary temple built by ancient man to worship animals.
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, now we are going a little bit under the surface. We are coming to archaeology and to a project which is one of the most important projects of the last years. That's not only my words, I'm the director of this project, but it's internationally told like this. It's a project in southeastern Turkey at a site called Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe means mound with belly, or mound with belly. It's just this name, an old name from the.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. The red ochre graffiti in the relieving chambers of the Great Pyramid is the main piece of evidence used by Egyptologists to date the structure to the 4th dynasty and the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. Yes, we know there has been radiocarbon dating on mortar found between the pyramid blocks, we know there is the Diary of Mira, and we also have the writings of Herodotus. But the Khufu graffiti that was discovered by Howard Weiss in the 19th century is a critical piece of evidence that associates Khufu with the Great Pyramid. Many alternative history websites and YouTube channels will tell you that this is a forgery, that it was painted by Howard Weiss himself so he could claim some major discovery and grab the headlines. In some circles, this is almost taken as an accepted fact. But, in my opinion, the burden of proof is on those making these forgery claims. If the graffiti said, built by Atlas, King of Atlantis, many in the alternative community would defend this piece of evidence at all costs. And don't get me wrong, I would love it if such a thing did exist, but I do hope I would be as objective and critical of this as I am about the Khufu graffiti. I used to have an alternative narrative in my head, totally influenced by the work of others, and I would look for further evidence to prove the narrative. I would also look to pick holes in anything that brought my narrative down. But that is totally the wrong way to tackle the subject of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx and the Giza Plateau. With regards to interpretation, what I've been doing in recent months and what I'll be doing going forward is not taking anyone's word as fact, whether an Egyptologist, scientist or alternative researcher, because I want to evaluate the evidence for myself and interpret it in the most logical way I can. Being a voice in the alternative community, once felt I had a duty to oppose conventional archaeology, to continue to push forward the Giza power plant theory, even though we can't seem to find anything it powered, to assume the Anunnaki were real sky gods who enslaved humanity, when such a thing has no supporting evidence. To say that every single pyramid is a pre-flood relic of a lost ancient civilization, when actually they were built by different civilizations with different methods in different periods of time. And finally, to accept the Sphinx is thousands of years older than we are told, when in fact there are other independent geologists who disagree. I've noticed that every time I quote a radiocarbon date as evidence against an alternative viewpoint, I receive countless comments telling me that radiocarbon dating is unreliable and a complete load of rubbish, and to simply take it with a pinch of salt. Yet when I say that Göbekli Tepe was built between the 10th and 8th millenniums BC, as shown by radiocarbon dating, nobody leaves a comment that these dates are unreliable and a load of rubbish. There seems to be a selective acceptance for radiocarbon dating. If you think it is unreliable and rubbish, fair enough, but you surely can't trust it for Göbekli Tepe either. Without the radiocarbon dating, can you prove to me that Göbekli Tepe isn't just, 4,000 years old? Therefore we have to have some confidence in the science, and if not, we have to discount it entirely. Some people say that the pyramids and the Giza Plateau are covered in seashells and marine organisms, proving that a deluge washed over the area, but this is simply untrue. Yes, there are lots and lots of fragmented shells on the pyramids and in the Giza sand, but this is simply because the rocks at Giza are primarily fossiliferous limestone. The sand is simply made from this limestone. Therefore, tiny fossil shells eroded from the limestone do cover the Giza Plateau and also the Sahara Desert, but no way do they indicate that seawater covered the pyramids. Some also say that these shells have been radiocarbon dated to the time of the so-called Great Flood, yet the same people are never able to provide a source. Such a test has never taken place. They are in fact 55 to 35 million years old. But some people still like to say that the Giza pyramids are around 10,000 years old, and if somebody counters this and says the original pyramid casing stones of the Khafre pyramid do not show 10,000 years of weathering, it is quickly countered by people saying that the pyramids were probably reclad in dynastic times. And this is my point. People are quick to defend their ideas and beliefs and to come up with a narrative that fits any evidence to the contrary. If the pyramid casing stones do not show 10,000 years of weathering, it probably means the pyramid is not 10,000 years old. That's the logical conclusion. If you want to believe the Giza pyramids are 10,000 years old, then you really need to present some evidence. Yes, they may well be, and the evidence is yet to be discovered, but until the time comes, we have to work with the evidence we have. There is a common belief that the dynastic Egyptians could not build the Great Pyramid, so therefore it must be far older. And yes, it's a nice assumption, and one that I would be willing to accept and get behind, but please tell me, why is this logical? Wouldn't it be more logical to assume that the 8 kings, the Romans or Greeks, built the Great Pyramid? That it is far younger and not older than the 4th dynasty, built by a more evolved and advanced society that had iron tools and arguably a deeper understanding of mathematics and science. But no, I don't think the pyramids are this young, but hopefully you see my point. If you don't think the dynastic Egyptians could build the pyramids, why do we assume that they date to thousands of years before? Egypt's Nabda Playa is dated to around 7,500 BC, and the simple ring of stones, although showing astronomical alignments, are so far removed from the Great Pyramid that you can't even compare the two. What other structure in pre-dynastic times can we use to prove that the Great Pyramid is likely to be from this period? What tools and technologies have been found that we could put together and use as evidence? I can get behind any idea if there is compelling evidence, but I won't jump on the alternative bandwagon without questioning the idea first. I feel I have a duty to be accurate and impartial, and to present facts and evidence, and make interpretations based on this evidence. It's one of the reasons I don't discuss ancient aliens, as I'm yet to see any compelling proof. And this brings me nicely to the famous Khufu graffiti. As stated, Howard Weiss discovered graffiti in the relieving chambers of the Great Pyramid, all made with red ochre paint. We are told that these are the work of the gangs of stonecutters and pyramid builders of Khufu. The huge blocks of granite contain variants of the pharaoh's name, such as Khufu, Khnum-Kuf and Medjiddu, the first two being found inside the royal cartouche, whilst the latter is the Horus name. The 4 relieving chambers opened by Howard Weiss all contained graffiti, yet the Khufu name was concentrated in just 2. One reason that many suspect a fraud is because the previously opened Davison's chamber contained no quarry marks at all, only the ones opened by Weiss, which does seem somewhat convenient. The most famous instance of graffiti written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs reads, "The Gang, Companions of Khufu," writing that was copied down by Mr. J.R. Hill, who was the assistant of Howard Weiss. It was sent to Samuel Birch at the British Museum, who identified the cartouche as belonging to Khufu, aka Cheops or Sufis. This confirmed that Pharaoh Khufu did build the Great Pyramid, therefore proving the Greek historian Herodotus correct, a man who first made the claim hundreds of years earlier. So, it seems like a straightforward story, a good piece of historical evidence, so why do so many people doubt it? Is it simply because we don't want to accept an Egyptological timeline of history? People don't seem to want to trust Howard Weiss, and the motive often put forward is that he had spent so much time in Egypt and had nothing to show for his work. He therefore needed to find something big, to stamp his name into the history books. But this is a baseless assumption. We don't know a great deal about Howard Weiss the man, or his ambitions, but if he was a devious character who wanted to pull off an almighty hoax, why didn't he use his money and resources to do a better job? He could have acquired any number of Egyptian artifacts from the countless excavations he was doing at the time and planted them inside the Great Pyramid. When he excavated beneath the floor of the king's chamber, he could have had Khufu's name engraved into the stone, or said, I don't know, that he found a statue of Osiris in the sand-filled cavities around the queen's chamber. The fact is, he could have done anything and gotten away with it. He could have flipped over the king's chamber sarcophagus and had the stonemason write Khufu's name onto it. He was a rich and powerful man, commanding a team of poor workers. He could have done a far better forgery if he really wanted to. Before the 19th century, nobody had ever gone into as much detail about the Great Pyramid as Howard Weiss, and he also made a number of new discoveries. He had free reign of the pyramid and could have set up a truly incredible find if he really wanted to, and that would have truly cemented his name in the history books. But as a mark of his character, we do know that Weiss signed over the ownership of his finds to the ruler of Egypt, and anything he was allowed to keep, he donated to the British Museum. And yes, we have the records. It really doesn't sound like the behaviour of a charlatan who could have made substantial money on the black market. The reason why he would do it was the first thing that came into my mind, but there is also another problem with the forgery hypothesis. Khufu's Horus name was Medjiddu, and this wasn't known about when Weiss was in Egypt. So how did he forge this name, as well as Khufu and Khnum-Kuf inside the Great Pyramid? It's an impossible forgery, and therefore it's impossible. Fans of Graham Hancock will know how he once supported the forgery hypothesis in his famous book Fingerprints of the Gods, but he has since changed his mind on the validity of the claims. Before he published his book, he was unable to gain access to the upper compartments of the Great Pyramid, but Zahi Hawass did allow him to spend an entire day inside the chambers back in December 1997. As Hancock says, there were no restrictions on where he could go, and he had the whole day to examine the hieroglyphs under powerful lights. He notes that cracks in some of the joints between the stones were small yet wide enough to see inside, and Hancock noted how the red ochre hieroglyphs were also set far back into the masonry. In Hancock's own words, no forger could have reached in there after the blocks had already been set in place. Blocks that weigh tens of tons each, are immovable and interlinked with one another. Hancock continues, the only reasonable conclusion is the one which orthodox Egyptologists have already long held, namely that the hieroglyphs are genuine Old Kingdom graffiti and that they were daubed on the block before construction began. Hancock offers supporting evidence that the star shafts and passageways of the Great Pyramid point to specific stars as they would have appeared in the night sky during the 4th dynasty, something which I'm not entirely in agreement with because of what Rudolf Gantenbrink said, and Mano explored them in great detail and explained that the shafts are far from straight and actually bend a great deal, therefore making them unlikely to be aligned with astronomical objects. Hancock believes that Khufu did build the Great Pyramid, or at least most of it, although admits that the subterranean chamber could be earlier. Saying that, he doesn't believe that the pyramid was built to be a tomb for the pharaoh, and even the Greek Herodotus also says that Khufu was not laid to rest inside the pyramid. John Anthony West also saw the graffiti in the relieving chambers and independently came to the same conclusion as Hancock regarding their age and authenticity.
Thanks for being here.
Access
will,
into the relieving
later.
chambers is severely restricted,
So,
and unless
thank you
we can
for
actually
watching.
go
You're the best.
inside and
Thank you
view
for
them
following
firsthand,
Yulan.
calling
Thanks
them
for
a
being here,
hoax
Ray.
is
Thanks for being
unfair and
here.
unfounded.
Wade. Okay.
As we've heard
So-
on the Joe Rogan podcast and seen from a
See ya.
live debate
Thank
that
you for
never
being here.
happened,
Bye.
there is no love lost between Graham Hancock and Zahi Hawass.